do a rap about it. I could get on the radio from a radio show and maybe you'd listen to me and how I go. But I'm not a mock, so don't stay in the dark. I'm not Daddy Donnie, so go fuck a shock like the Fonz on Happy Days, because that's the end of this old haze in the pro wrestling days. All right?
Jesus,
and that's
that
a
might
terrible rap. And
might
it'll
be the
get
best
more views.
transition,
It's a terrible rap, but it's going to get more views than the rap Daddy Donnie did to promote a WWE superstar. Let's go to that right now.
Welcome to another CastAsCastCan podcast. I am your host for the controversies, Mr. Marvelous. And of course, I'm joined by the notorious one-star Caden Felix.
That's right, the notorious one-star here with Mr. Marvelous. And as always, we are here to give you the auspicious, autistic analysis of everything in pro wrestling that only we can provide with our IQ that is unparalleled in all of professional wrestling.
Our IQ has been making lots of waves, eh? It's been really
lots
incredible.
of waves, lots of views. And
not Facebook likes, though, eh?
The likes, the comments, they seem not to be there, but the views speak for themselves. And there's something more than views right now. We're seeing who is viewing the files that we've shared about the investigations that we've been conducting recently, huh?
Yeah, so if you haven't watched the last episode, we broke another controversy. There was a lawsuit over a death in a professional wrestling school in North Bay, and so we riffed on that. So you haven't seen that, go back and watch it. But I
mean, you don't even hear about deaths in pro wrestling. They talk about how dangerous pro wrestling is when they were talking about concussion protocols. Pro wrestling was demonized for steroids, for concussions, and so many other things. And now here's a death that actually occurred in training and not even a match, which is usually where these type of things happen in. And I can think of Ted DiBiase's father. I can think of Mitsuhara Misawa, which he had some complications that led to his death, and some other women's wrestling matches in Japan, a recent match with Rey Mysterio. But those were all professionals, and we're talking about training now and the dangers therein.
Yeah, and I think that's what was that was one of the things that I found interesting is that I'm in touch with the scene and I follow it for the first 10 days and that it was published in the.
This happened in 2022, Runyon. This happened in 2022.
And it took until it was published online 10 days later for us to find out, which was interesting.
Exactly. And we are going to have more details about that. We've talked to some authorities in the situation.
Counsel.
We've talked to some lawyers. We have that coming for you later. We're going to talk about, we have a lot more insight on that later, but we have some insight on that right now in terms of Dan Pagozzo and things we've talked about in regards to him earlier. Don't we?
Well, yeah. So we like we said, we've been digging, we've been talking about it. There's been lots of people messaging us, and we actually found another video. It was from a Northland wrestling show.
And a very recent one. But the gist of what happened is on brand for what we talked about with Dan Pagozzo, a.k.a. Dan Jarrus, a.k.a. likely to cause harm, as it says on his T-shirt. Isn't that right, Runyon?
Yeah. So I'm going to just pull up the video that we got here. Just give me a second here. And yeah, so right here. So you'll see Nick Asylum against Dan Jarrus in a match. And
boom, and there it is, a TKO.
A TKO.
But look at Dan Jarrus, the way he's selling that.
Yeah, it looks very abnormal. Looks like
it looks like he's frozen in place. It doesn't look like he's selling in a pro wrestling kind of way, and in a way that you might consider being associated with an acting school.
Do you think he landed on his head on that face bump?
I mean, through the grapevine, I've heard that it was nerve damage, whatever that means.
Well, it's
is that
congruent? Kind of neck injury. He looks like He looks like those NFL guys when they go head on to a guy and they end up in some kind of severe neck injury. You know, where they just go.
Is that what he looks like to you? You know what he looks like
to me?
Look
Look
at
his
me?
hands. Yeah, look at his arms. He's just kind of like.
To me, he looks like a soccer player when they get nicked on the ear with a fingertip. That's what he looks like to me.
Fair enough.
Referees are calling for other referees. Again, with this individual, it's in question. Is it a work? Is it a shoot? We don't know. Is he involved with the college? Is this part of the acting protocol? Are the referees actors in training? These are all questions that are valid at this stage, aren't they?
I would assume it appears to be a shoot, but I don't rule out anything as being a work in pro wrestling. And to be honest,
absolutely,
this wouldn't be the first wrestling show to fake an injury and call a shoot ambulance for that injury, because I've seen that
absolutely happen. And I've been on shows where the promoters have done that notoriously and famously to avoid paying the wrestlers. So I trust that everyone got paid on this show. I got my money in the end. And we'll talk about that later, because that relates to something else we're going to be talking about here. But Dan Jarrus calls an early intermission as the promoter, as the booker for this promotion. And he does it as he's seemingly paralyzed, speaking into the mic, doesn't he?
Well, that comes up later. But right now, it appears he's communicating with two officials and I don't know, another guy. And actually, there's more crew on the side of the ring, outside of the ring.
I've never seen anything like this, and I hope Dan is okay.
So here, they just announced that they're going to go to intermission.
Who announced? Was it Dan on the mic?
No,
or the ring announcer.
This announcer guy. So
yeah.
Well, okay. What do you think? Work or shoot?
I mean, if I had to guess, gun to my head, I mean, we talked about allegations. We talked about things we don't know about. We talked about things where we weren't there, and I wasn't there. But this looks like a work to me.
Well, yeah. So this is, I guess, if we don't know for sure, because realistically, you only know if it's a work or a shoot if you're in the ring and experiencing things. But
famous quote attributed to Al Snow: "Only the two guys in the ring know."
There you go. Yeah. And
what's up?
And is it possible that he landed on his head and he's not paralyzed, but he's freakishly concerned that something happened? So now he's just not moving?
I mean, that's possible, especially considering what he's experienced in his own dojo and the dangers of that. Maybe he's especially careful right now. But he's been known to wrestle with injuries and boast about his own injuries and forge his own injuries.
Yeah, there's
so we don't really know.
There's a number of cases that we pulled up where he does have injuries, which is quite interesting.
And as we know, he loves being the center of attention here in Northland Wrestling. So who knows what the case could really be? Is he acting? Is he an actor? An actor?
He's definitely the center of attention right now, and you can see lights coming in with an ambulance. And we're gonna fast forward this if need be for the viewers, but so we're still waiting here.
Tick tock, Dan's in the ring. We've announced an impromptu intermission. Maybe there's going to be some more announcements. Huh?
Let's see. So they're getting out a gurney or a stretcher or something.
Well, looks like the promoter, the booker, the star, who's always injured and fighting up from underneath, has something to say. Even in this state of affairs, being the center of attention, he draws even more attention to himself by speaking something into the microphone to display his authority over everything that's going on.
The announcer's bringing in a mic right now, so they won't let him get up. They got 4 more matches and the crowd pops. That's cool.
That's an announcement. Did he make that announcement? Was the mic shoved down his throat as his throat is wrapped by
you can see the guy
a
holding
neck
it.
brace.
And then
Who was holding that? Was it a ring announcer or
the ring announcer?
The ring announcer is on his knees as
Yeah.
the paramedics are tending to Dan, and Dan makes the announcement. I mean, you even talk about Super Dave Osborne or any other stuntman, Evel Knievel. They simply give the thumbs up. But no, that's not enough for Dan Jarrus. He's got to get on the mic, and he's got to own it, and he's got to be the center of attention, tell you that everything is okay. Is it okay, Dan? Is your neck hurt or not?
He has to announce that there's some kind of a concussion, and there's 4 more matches coming, and he probably won't be back.
Is that how you would have approached this situation if you were injured and the booker and the promoter, Runyon?
Jesus. I mean, safety is number one, but it's like I would maybe not get the injured guy regardless.
I think that job's out the ring announcer. What about you?
I mean, yeah.
I think it jobs out the ring announcer.
Regardless of the person in the ring's that's injured position, I don't think it's...
Because as far as the fans of Northland are concerned, what authority does Dan have? The ring announcer is the one who makes the matches. The referees are the ones who make decisions. And here he is, a guy flat on his ass who just got hurt in one of the first matches on the show, who they know as a talent on the show, and now he's calling the shots. What say you?
I just hope he's okay. I hope he's okay. And
I certainly do.
I hope the people around him are okay, because as we went through the allegations,
but that's not what I asked, Runyon. I mean, is that where the priority should lie? Is the question that I'm asking you, and I'm going to ask it quite pointedly
in the
here.
Ring with a potential broken neck, I wouldn't stick a microphone in his mouth. But
would you ask to have it stuck in yours if you potentially had a broken neck?
No.
Especially if you have a ring announcer, you have referees, you have authority figures.
That's what I'm getting at.
Well, I want to be explicit because that's what we do here. We're not vagots. We don't vague post. We don't ask vague questions. And I'm being explicit with you as I would be with Dan or anybody else, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I think we've finished that off, and we're going to move on.
But we're not done with Dan, because we're going to talk a lot more about that later, because we have some interesting guests. We're going to shed a lot of light on that situation. But before we get to that,
we've got another controversy. How about that?
How about that?
Of course, it's online. And this one's with an Ontario native, Jimmy Korderas.
Jimmy Korderas, but his influence spans a lot beyond Ontario, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, he worked in the WWE in a pretty prominent role.
How many years was he there prominently? In about 20 years, no? 15, 20 years?
Yeah, and I mean, I think he refed a couple main events of WrestleMania.
Absolutely. Tremendous referee.
Of course, there's question of like how
I attended his referee seminar at Square Circle, by the way.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, that's good. So we have personal experience too, but I think there's question of like.
But now he has gone into the realm of podcasting, right? And that's what this revolves around.
This is one of the things I wanted to say is like with his podcast, like he has these things, ref and rants, where he just talks about the booking and creative direction of the show. And to me, I always found that puzzling because he worked in a role that had nothing to do with that. What say you?
I mean, I think there's a lot of YouTubers, there's a lot of commenters who have some very valuable opinions on booking and things like that. And they've never stepped anywhere near a ring beyond the guardrail. And they offer some very good insight. And often people, everyone has their own skill sets. They say those who cannot do teach. And, maybe those who cannot even teach analyze. And, Siskel and Ebert were some famous movie reviewers, and either one of them made a very good movie. So I think there's something to be said that some people are born to be critics. But if you're going to be a critic, there's some certain guidelines on how to do that better or worse. Does that track, Runyon?
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, I mean, they did the show on the score, which was like, it was okay. And like I just feel like he's hypercritical of things, but that's just my opinion. But anyways, so
I mean,
what
I don't
happened?
watch enough of that to know how critical he would be, but I would imagine that such an individual, especially with, not to give away any spoilers, with how loyal he seems to be to WWE, I'm surprised at the level of critique he has for former WWE talent and how much he criticizes things. I think he would be much more centrist and not willing to take a stance and more so sit on the fence about things.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a fair point too. And that kind of segues into what happened. So I'm going to pull up a
Because this
tweet
is
here.
definitely not a fence sitting moment here. This is a definitive take with a definitive stance that is very pointed and very abrasive. If you, unless you have a better word.
Yeah, so there's a tweet here by this guy Brandon the Heel, and he's saying, and he's got screenshots to back it up. It says Ricochet chose to stay in WWE for 5+ years, as well as reports that he re-signed his deal in 2022. And he makes claims that he hated going to work every week, but he could have quit. He could have asked for his release, and he didn't. Yeah, so Jimmy responds, he stayed 5+ years and re-signed in 2022. If it was really that miserable, he could have asked for his release. He didn't. Name dropping guys who also chose to stay for years and speaking for them is Bush League. That makes him look bad, not the company he's constantly trashing. So I think another tweet that he's referencing is that Ricochet made some comments, which I'm going to pull up right now. Response is something else that made headlines a couple of days before. Ricochet says his 5 years on the WWE main roster tarnished his wrestling legacy. And he says the same is true for guys like Finn Balor, Shinsuke Nakamura, Apollo Creed, and many others. WWE kills legacies and love of the sport. It's what they do best. So, you have any thoughts on that?
There's a lot to debrief on there, Runyon, but the one thing I can say is, I mean, there's facts and there's opinions. And having differing opinions on a fact is one thing. And if Ricochet signed a 5-year contract and Jimmy Korderas is criticizing him, saying he signed a contract in a certain year when he didn't, that's one thing. And Jimmy Korderas is putting fallacies out there when he doesn't have the information, and that's wrong. But where I'm going to disagree with Ricochet is that I think that my most memorable moments of Ricochet are WWE. He said he didn't want the Intercontinental title. He said he didn't want certain things to do with WWE. He said he wanted to be released. I will tell you right now, my most fondest memories of him, and I would wager that most children and most people who spend the most money on pro wrestling and spend most money on merchandise, and his merchandise would be his moments in WWE. And I think those will grossly outshine anything he does in AEW or anywhere else. What say you?
Well, I mean, regardless of anything, it's definitely the biggest platform he's ever been on. And I don't know how much money he made per year and all that stuff, but
of course,
I mean, he would have been compensated very well in WWE. He could be making more now in AEW, and that's a fair point. But like, it's not Ricochet's TV show to dictate, like, if he's not happy with his creative direction or the way his matches are presented, it's not his TV show to make those decisions, and he's paid to fulfill what the TV show wants him to do. So I think I'm not really sure I see where his viewpoint is, but also, so
I mean, if I may, I can't understand why he would think that his legacy is bigger in AEW, where, to me, from where I sit, anything he has done in WWE is so much bigger. You talk about him being the Intercontinental Champion, the way he was presented on TV, the way the commentators talked about him, it all just adds up to a bigger, larger-than-life character than the one I'm seeing in AEW.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's like if you're on the bigger platform, you're going to get more exposure, and that's just the way it is. And but then so Jimmy's we
But again,
run
that
through his.
doesn't discount what he says about Jimmy and Jimmy's opinion on him, because Jimmy outright says some things that are incorrect, that are lies, that are wrong.
Well,
And
yeah.
Ricochet corrects him, doesn't he?
So I think we'll pull up Ricochet's response. So Ricochet responds to Jimmy's direct tweet, and I'm gonna quote it. He says, "Jimmy, shut the fuck up, you old ass cuck idiot. I signed one contract in 2019 for 5 years. It was up in 2024, and I left. No re-sign, no second contract. I did ask for my release. They denied it and made me IC champ, knowing I said I didn't want it. So maybe a little bit of research before you use your cocksucker to say some stupid shit."
Now hold on, Runyon. I'm using my cocksucker right now, my cock right now to do something, and what that is I'm just draining it out here, and that's my number one jug of the week. The golden glug that's gonna go to the number one moment of the week right here is to this tweet, this X, whatever the hell you call it these days, and that's Ricochet's response to Jimmy Korderas, because this is a tremendous response. As much as I might not be a fan of what Ricochet is doing in AEW or anything else, he responds to Jimmy Korderas tremendously here. He lets Jimmy Korderas know what the facts are and where he stands, and he stands by what he means and the man that he is and the stance he has taken, and I respect that. Respect to you, light skin, kingpin, golden glug. Drink it down. You're number one. What say you, Runyon?
Yeah, I like the directness of it, and I like the I mean, so what?
He's not being a faggot here, is he? He's not vague posting. He's calling him out, and I love it on both of their parts. And
have some balls and call him out. And I think I couldn't find any responses from Jimmy, but let's also bear in mind that Jimmy Korderas is. Because this isn't the first time we talked about Jimmy on this show. He's a proponent of the Matt Grant loss.
We talked about him very briefly. Briefly.
We brought up that he was a proponent of the Matt Grant lost wages lawsuit. Him and his HugePop Radio buddy Donnie.
So let's be clear. Matt Grant accused Mike Clark,
right,
of bad mouthing him to promoters, which I can imagine probably happened. And we have different takes on how severe that situation was and our opinions on that situation. But in the end, it probably happened that Mike Clark did that. And you did an analysis of how much wages he could have lost. But they had a particular opinion on how this should be solved, didn't they?
Well, yeah. And it's startling to me that a guy with Jimmy's status would take that stance. And especially considering
now, be explicit about that stance. What exactly did they say?
The stance that you in this argument, which you have Mike Clark against Matt Grant, you would take Matt Grant's side, a guy who, like, he's limited in what he can present in professional wrestling, and this is just.
Now, here's where I disagree, Runyon. On the one hand, I'm on Matt Grant's side. All right, I'm on Matt Grant's side in saying that Mike Clark shouldn't do that. Mike Clark, if he thinks pro wrestling should be a certain way, he should present it in that way. But for him to go and badmouth Matt Grant to whoever's booking him is another case entirely. But what is another case even entirely is that Jimmy Korderas and Big Daddy Donnie should think that this argument has any place in a court of law, because we're going to be talking about law. We're going to be talking with lawyers, and what we're talking about here is preposterous that any lawyer would even have a second glance at this, isn't it?
Well, yeah, because you're talking about guys who willingly work shows for basically no money or very little
peanuts.
Money, and
it's one thing to consider whether that's worthwhile or not, but whether
I think it's like the fact that the judicial system would legitimately look at something like this, which is preposterous.
And that's what they were presenting. Like Jimmy Korderas and Big Daddy Donnie were saying, you have a case, Matt Grant. Take him to court. And that is preposterous. That is ridiculous. That is retarded, and only pussies could have come up with that.
So then,
to quote Mike Lark,
I thought we could take a look at the platform that these two guys, because I know HugePop Radio. I don't really listen to it, but we've got.
I don't, but there's something that came up in my feed about them that I definitely want to talk about. Yeah,
we'll get to that later, but it's so here we got if you go on YouTube, HugePop, Donnie DeSilva.
So here's HugePop Radio. And we're talking radio. We're not talking internet. We're talking to the lineage that dates back to arguably the first ever wrestling podcast, the first ever wrestling radio show in Canada, especially, maybe even online. The first one that drew me into pro wrestling. I first started listening to Spider Jones on the Fan 590, but then I found out about the Law. The live audio wrestling. And this is related to that lineage.
Well, yeah. So this is the thing, like you mentioned live audio wrestling, and I don't think they've done it justice, because here's an interview with Scott D'Amore that has 9 views and was posted 10 months ago. Here's an interview with Mr. Kennedy that has 26 views that was also posted 10 months ago.
I can do 9 on the screen. How would I do 26? 26. All right, there you go.
And they got an interview here with the former world champion, Drew McIntyre, 29 views.
29 views.
And like, I guess what we're looking at here is we just see this.
And people are criticizing us. People are saying how pathetic we are. And we're getting more views for our reviews than the matches we are reviewing. All right. And so imagine if we had a WWE superstar. Imagine if we had a former WWE superstar. Imagine if we had an AEW superstar to interview, but it's just me and you, Runyon. How entertaining are we?
I think we're very entertaining, and we're just kicking ass on this podcast. You look at the views
and we're finding the facts, and we're shining our bat signal down on the fallacies and everything else. And here's another one we're going to shine on down. We're going to expose why HugePop Radio is not what they claim to be.
Yeah, and there's this. Have you heard this social media guy, the Wrestling Classic? You heard this? You know this? I don't. Maybe you don't know, but I.
Definitely not, no.
Okay, fair. But he's got a pretty big platform, and I guess HugePop is on there. I wonder if they pay him to be on there, but
he's a guest on the HugePop podcast.
Wait. There's a typo, and I'm just realizing this now. Donnie Del Silva, so they can't even spell his name correctly.
So let me get this straight. So we got Donnie De Silva, we got Big Daddy Donnie, we got Jimmy Korderas. And they make use of this other fellow to get and WWE superstars in order to get their 29 views. They need 4 people, including WWE superstars and former WWE superstars, and the innovator of wrestling podcast in order to get 29 views. Is that what I'm reading here, Runyon?
Juxtaposed to the show that you're watching right now, where it's just me and you talking.
Yeah.
We haven't had a guest. In fact, people turn down the show, and we just make waves and controversy.
We've gotten direct messages. We've gotten criticisms, whether they were in messages and replies onto Facebook posts or emails or anywhere else. People correcting us, people admonishing us. And guess what we said? We didn't hide our heads in the sand and say, "You weren't there." We said, come on the podcast and defend your point, and nobody has.
No, nobody.
And maybe let me stop you there. Maybe if I could do a rap about it. I could get on the radio from my radio show, and maybe you'd listen to me and how I go. But I'm not a mock, so don't stay in the dark. I'm not Daddy Donnie, so go fuck a shock like the Fonz on Happy Days, because that's the end of this old haze in the pro wrestling days. All right?
Jesus,
and that's
that
a terrible rap. And it'll get more views. It's a terrible rap, but it's gonna get more views than the rap Daddy Donnie did to promote a WWE superstar. Let's go to that right now.
Yeah, so let's
Big Daddy Donnie, he had the opportunity to interview a WWE superstar, Raquel Rodriguez, and instead of promoting her, he covered up his face with a microphone and rapped. And
it says here, as always, Donnie dropped one of his over-the-top intros. So this is like a normal thing that he does. Yeah.
And this rap here by Big Daddy Donnie, what did it get? It got maybe 30 views. It got maybe 1 like. And who was the 1 like from, Runyon?
Let's take a look right here. Oh, Jimmy Korderas, of course.
It was from Jimmy Korderas.
Jimmy Korderas' partner is the only one that liked it.
Is this journalism? Is this pro wrestling? Is this anything to do with promoting what you're promoting and having a WWE superstar as an auspicious guest? Well, our auspicious autistic analysis is analyzing you, and this sucks.
Let's play it. Speaking of it sucks, let's play it.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I think you know who I'm talking about, or at least you have a guess. She's the one who comes and rescues when Liv is in distress. Ever since she joined the Judgment Day, they've had way more success. And Carlito always makes me pop when he tries to caress. When I saw that Tahana bomb, it left me speechless. She's a little heel, but those pearly whites, they are her weakness. And she's smiling right now. Don't mad dog me. That is meanness. Now give it up for WWE Tag Champ Raquel Rodriguez.
Okay, so that was something. I think it's like if you're not getting views.
Oh, well, let me ask you a question, Ryan. I'm sorry to cut you off, but if we had a WWE superstar on CastAsCastCan,
right, and we will
to be put under the microscope of our auspicious autistic analysis, do you think either one of us would cut a rap about it and then put that as the commercial?
No,
for the said segment.
Well, I think you want to feature the guest to hype the show. I'm not featuring myself to hype a show where I'm going to talk to someone.
And furthermore, if you are going to feature yourself, would you cover yourself behind a microphone like this and only show your eyes and not even show your guest? Would you do that? And just be the biggest simpy white knight you've ever seen in the history of faggotry and vaggotry?
That's definitely one approach, but I think it works for Donnie, but it doesn't appear.
Let us know in the comments.
And yeah,
does it work for him when he gets 1 like and it's from Jimmy Korderas?
Well, there is this. Let's pull this one up.
TSN, more power to you.
So when Ricochet attacked Jimmy, Donnie had a response and said,
"Oh boy, let's see what he has to say."
Has reached a new level of stupid by publicly attacking my main man Jimmy. So he's a friend through the end. Your lame attempts to prove you have a personality and to work the internet are transparent as hell. So basically, there's no way that Ricochet could dislike Jimmy Korderas, and it's got to be a work just for attention. What do you think about that?
Well, based on what Donnie's saying here, the only option Ricochet had was to say, "Oh my God, Jimmy, you're right. I'm a fucking idiot."
I think the lack of professionalism on Donnie's part is startling. I think, but like I've never met Donnie. I've met Jimmy.
I met him,
but this theme that we're seeing based off his posts online seem to run online because did you know the CNE story with Mike Clark and Donnie DeSilva?
Oh, tell me.
So
do you know the CNE story with Mike Clark and Buck Gunderson?
well, that's another podcast. But let's there was apparently there was and I saw the screenshots. There was a threats for physical harm made by Donnie towards Mike Clark that was going to transpire at the CNE, and Mike was very out in the open the entire CNE, and Donnie was nowhere to be found. So I thought that, like, it's just a lot.
Well, that doesn't surprise me because Daddy Donnie, we talked about it earlier. I mean, I would say, you know what? He might be the Big Daddy Donnie, might be the biggest pussy in all of Ontario under wrestling. Because I talked about it earlier when I said radio show host, podcast host suggested I should have been blackballed for working that show I mentioned, Hardcore Road Trip, and it was him. It was Big Daddy Donnie that said it. And when I met him, well, he had an opinion. He said I should be blackballed. And when I met him, and I met him at the grand opening of Battle Arts, and I walked right up to him and I said, "Hey, I'm booked for that Hardcore Road Trip. Who is it for you to say that I shouldn't work for this fellow? Who is it for you to say that I should be blackballed?" And he said, "Oh, it's just hyperbole." So he totally ran from any confrontation, ran from any blame, didn't want to talk about it. He said it was hyperbole. So what does that say about anything he has to say in pro wrestling? It's all hyperbole. It's all bullshit. And if you want to bring your bullshit against us, you're invited to come on this podcast. What say you, Ryan?
No, it's public. I can DM him, or we can just do it publicly. Come on the podcast and talk about it.
Absolutely.
We'll
talk about it.
And don't worry, we won't bring Sag and Knobs to the podcast too. But also, this is also the guy that ran that Only the Toughest promotion in Channing Decker's venue, and they drew balls. Yeah. So
define drew balls.
It was like 15 people.
Okay.
And anything under 100 is balls in my opinion. And here we are. This is very cool because we've got our first ever special guests joining us on the CastAsCastCan podcast. We've had a lot of people invited to the CastAsCastCan podcast, and nobody wants to come on. But now we've got our first guests here, so this is really cool. So we're gonna go around the horn. Buck, what you got to say?
Yeah, I want to add here, and isn't it interesting? We've had so much commentary, so many critiques on our commentaries here on the podcast. And with all of those critics, all of those commenters, those keyboard warriors, those vague posting vagots online, not one of them has accepted that invitation. But, you know, a lot of people want to say a lot of things about lawyers, but our first guests here are lawyers. So why don't we hear a little bit more about them and have them introduce themselves, our auspicious guests on our podcast here.
Yeah, so let's go around the horn. I don't know how this is going to come out when we record it, but directly beneath me is Sam. So, Sam, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and why you're someone that we should pay attention to what you think.
Sure. My name's Sam Glass. I've been a licensed paralegal for 15 years. I'm currently, I have my law degree out of the UK and doing a double LLM here in Toronto. And my goal is entertainment law. So currently I help wrestlers within my scope of practice at the small claims court. But I'm no stranger to wrestling, as I was training when I was 18 years old to actually wrestle. And unfortunately, I didn't continue with that, but my worlds have collided with law and wrestling. And that's why I want to be here today to talk about this very important issue that we're going to discuss.
Yeah, and I think it's good that you're going to get into entertainment law, because maybe I can use you one day. Now we're friends.
For sure.
Now, so, and then the bottom right, we have our friend JP. So JP, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us why we should pay attention to what you think.
So my name is JP Rodriguez. I'm a lawyer. I've been a long-time wrestling fan. I know the 1 star over here since he was getting 1 stars in grade 9 science. So our days go back in terms of being fans and listening along to Monday Night Raw from time. And again, it's a great way to combine my love of law and my love of wrestling. And I think it's going to be a great conversation. Actually, I think we once had this idea of how does law and wrestling intersect, and here we are, and really happy to be on here. And the other thing that Sam and I also have in common is we work in the college environment. So I think it's another layer to look at in this situation, right? Is that it ties to college, so we can bring that perspective. And happy to chat with you guys today.
And I think I got to take a quick second to put over all these interesting artifacts you got behind you. I think you got the Money in the Bank briefcase and some really cool. It all appears to be wrestling related, but I can't really make it out. But it's something that maybe one day I can take a look at closer because it looks really, really cool. But yeah, so we did an episode, I don't know, I guess last week or whenever it was, but I don't know. We record and then it comes out in different days and all that. But it was pretty heavy. It was a heavy subject and it was controversial. And like, I'm not a lawyer and Buck's not a lawyer. So we got in touch with you guys. And I mean, I guess first of all, have you been through the court documents or at least read the media on what we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
So just a reminder to everybody, all the listeners, everyone watching this on YouTube, all the Vegas in the Ontario Indie Wrestling Board. Listen, because we're talking about the biggest subject that's being swept under the rug. We're talking about that Broke Neck Mountain situation up in the Northland Wrestling in North Bay, and a death that happened, a wrongful death in a wrestling school of all places. It's a very interesting situation. There's a lot of interesting accusations going on, and we're going to dig into it deeper in a way that Runyon and myself can't. So we brought in the professionals.
Well, I guess, like, first of all, I know what I think, but like, what do you think are the most interesting things that are going to be looked at? Because obviously the courts are going to handle it, and I fully respect the judicial process. But after reading the documents and kind of going through the facts, what do you think the interesting parts that could come out of this? And whoever wants to jump in first, how about I'll lead it. So how about we start with Sam?
Sure. So, I mean, wrestling has risks. We know the risks, and we understand that this is not just wrestling, it's entertainment. And this individual that died was an entertainer. And there's kind of two sides to the story. And I think I have an unpopular opinion whereby I believe, she knew the risks, and she stepped into this school knowing that maybe she could be harmed. Maybe she had underlying conditions that she didn't disclose, but she was an adult, and she should have said something if she had underlying conditions. And ultimately it was to her demise. Really, my opinion, whether I agree with what happened here or not, it comes down to, was this person, this teacher, were they in a position where they had power over her and shouldn't have referred her to a school, using their power, and ultimately potentially is negligent for negligent referral. And I think maybe the teacher is, because students trust us, right? When we tell them something, they go by what we say, and she trusted this person and went along with what he said, or she said. Sorry, my apologies. I'm not sure if the teacher is a male or female, but the point is, it's a male. The point is that she trusted him. So maybe she trusted him too much, and maybe she wanted to prove that she could do this regardless of the dangers associated with it. But maybe she had some underlying reasons and never disclosed them. So I don't know. I think that she voluntarily took this risk, and unfortunately it was to her demise.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a good point that will definitely have to be fleshed out, is at what point do you draw the line between the adult having, being informed and on the decisions that they make, and then having a higher person like a coach, a teacher, etc., asserting, guidance that might not necessarily be in their best interests. Because it's a line that I know gets, like, even like I work in finance and stuff, and these publicly traded companies, I know there's a lot of risks and guidelines around these high executives and how they conduct themselves with the employees and such, because it can get into a conflict of interest very quickly. And so I think that's something that'll definitely have to be fleshed out. Is this a situation where the coach was having full dominance over the decision making, or was the victim, partaking to the point that they knew what was going on? JP, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, I think what you have to also factor in, yes, wrestling has those risks, right? We see things like, even in the WWE, right? Big E's career ended from something that happened in the ring. But at the same time, we got to look at who is this person, right? This entertainer. What background did they have? What were they told of the risk, right? I mean, I had a brief cameo in VCW many years. I think the role was Johnny Cochran III. And, I just got in there, got kind of roughed up in the corner. But, I'm not taking any body slams or pile drivers or anything like that. Even if I had, a 30-minute here's how to fall, it's not going to suffice, right? I mean, for someone who's an entertainer first and foremost. And you see it even when, in the professionals, that they're bringing in all these celebrities to do a one-off on WrestleMania, right? That what is the voluntary assumption of risk that they're getting into, right? And I think that's going to be, a piece, should this go all the way to trial, is what were they told, right? What did they have? What happened? How many classes did they go into, and what was happening there? Because it's the difference, as Sam and the one star, right? And in that, when you went to wrestling schools, right, it was geared towards the people who wanted to get into the professional wrestling, right? And you knew what you were getting into. Whereas now, when we're looking at a lot of entertainers and former athletes, in other venues, are they equipped with that same knowledge, right, of what actually is this? And that's, I think, an important piece, as well as obviously the connection to the instructor and the school, right? Because depending on how that was connected, right, where they flyers up in the college saying, hey, you should check out this wrestling school, suggest, maybe, hey, you go to this wrestling school, you might get a better mark in my class. And now it's more of a involvement of the college rather than just, something on a passion project on the side, right? So how closely linked are the college through the instructor as well as the wrestling school itself?
And just if you didn't,
I had a couple
mind
questions.
Go ahead.
Some of the stuff you said for both of you, but more so Sam.
Sure.
Just to interject here real quick. So especially for Sam, in regards to she's an adult, she knows the risks. But again, in terms of what you both said about the mentorship, I saw that word. I bring it up. You didn't bring it up, but I saw that in some of the documents we read, whether it was the news story or some of the files. This girl was mentored by one of the co-owners, and it was related to the drama program, and it was almost like her drama teacher recruited her. Now, and another thing I read, which especially applies to the risk and her being adult and understanding, would this change things, is if she sustained what was assumed to be a minor injury, and she was encouraged by these coaches, both Dan Pagozzo and Joshua Bain, he says he was just a student there, but whoever was the coach in question encouraged her to work through these injuries, which I guess were new to her. Maybe she wasn't an athlete. Does that put a different coat of paint on things if that is the case?
Depends on the injury. I mean, my when I was in wrestling school, that's what we were to do. We were to work through the pain. But we were always asked, what kind of pain are you in? And there were checks and balances in place, even to get into the school. The door wasn't just open and anybody could walk in. There were questions. There was an interview to get into the school. And as you were training, there were checks and balances. So anytime there was an injury, I remember the coach saying, where are you injured? Is it your head? And if it was your head, they stopped you. So I think it depends on what the injury is, because we were taught some injuries, you continue on.
Well, I think it's with the word injury, to me, an injury, you don't work through an injury ever. An injury means it's different than being hurt or being in pain. There's being hurt
and there's being injured. And if you're injured, it's a situation where you're going to the hospital. And often when you are injured, and obviously we don't have the details of the situation, but I'm somebody who's broken bones wrestling, and you want to keep going. The adrenaline kicks in, and it takes a coach to step in and say, hey, no, you need to sit down because the adrenaline's flowing and you don't know where you're at. You need to breathe for a bit. And it takes that experience and knowledge in the sport, athletics, as well as perhaps first aid to some degree. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, because I guess when I say injury, it could be a sprain, right? It could be, I don't mean a broken bone. So I guess, yeah, depending on the severity, absolutely. I think you're right. We would want to continue on because we're there for that adrenaline rush, right? So makes sense to me.
But I think that's what makes it tricky is that it's a head injury. And I know even at the professional level, like I played high level football, and when I was playing, it was a big deal. It was like they were kind of sorting through it. So I guess maybe wrestling's a little bit behind, but like you can't, like if I have a sprained ankle, there's signs of me having this ailment. Whereas a concussion, it's much harder to spot it. And then also there are definitely protocols that you should follow, because the biggest issue with a concussion is that when you have multiple concussions, so you get hit repetitively. And I mean, according to the news reports, it seems to be the death was caused by some kind of repeated head trauma. And as far as I know, like especially within the wrestling community, there are no precedents or like first aid requirements, and it's all little questions like this that really makes this whole case to me really interesting, because it's like, okay, so at what point are judges going to step in and like really hammer people to like, no, we need to clean all this up? And does that sound kind of like where this is going? JP, what do you think?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I mean, we have obviously professional sports, in Ontario where there's no regulations, right? And so, what is there in place for? I think the same thing. I remember reading something where a kid was injured in like one of these indoor playgrounds, right, where they fell off one of the sort of up in the
play structure.
Yeah, structure, right? And so, right, you got to look at, well, what do we have in place for wrestling schools or similar kinds of venues, right? In terms of are they safety standards that have to be met? Who are the people certified? Because again, you mentioned football, right? In football, they go to the blue tent, they get checked out before they come back in the game, and if they say, independent doctors say, you can't go back in there, then they don't go back in there. So what kind of happened, and what were the protocols, or what are the protocols, right? I mean, that's something that's going to be important. I mean, not just in this issue, but this is going to raise, well, what about other people, right? And again, you're seeing all sorts of things in wrestling at all levels where people are getting injured, but what do we have to prevent it? And especially at the lower levels, right, in the indies, right, is that you have it. It's a badge of honor, as you said, right? You go back out there and you fight the very next day. Because you don't want to be the one that's holding up the event or creating any trouble, right? So I mean, sometimes you got to have people to be like the voice of the voiceless, so to speak, right? That say, look, I know you want to go out there, but you can't, right? And so what do they have in mechanisms that they have in place? And again, this is not somebody who has been training for years and is envisioning a career, in the big feds there, right? I mean, it's someone who looks like they had more acting chops than anything. So what would they know about taking a head injury? Like, what are the, have they ever had one? Right? Have they played any sports where they would have really to know they have a concussion when they got to rest, right? I mean, that all plays into what to do.
Yeah, and I feel like it really needs to kind of flesh out like the waiver process, what kind of papers need to be signed, and what kind of where informed consent can be achieved. But another thing that kind of puts another whole twist on this whole thing that I feel like I think it should be resolved with this, but we'll see if it happens, is that we've been talking about wrestling as a sport, but there's also an element of entertainment to it, and it's a television show in a lot of aspects. So I think what I'd like to see looked at with this case is like, is wrestling a sport or is it a television show? Because I feel like the actual final outcome would be determined by one of those, by that kind of decision. Does that sound like we're on the right track? What do you think, Sam?
Absolutely, because it's not wrestling. It is wrestling, but it's wrestling entertainment. So it's very different from wrestling. Right. So no, I think it's in its own category. And I think this case will definitely put it into a place where, there's some guidance from the courts as to how this is looked at, because right now, yes, it's not regulated, but that doesn't mean there shouldn't be checks and balances in place. There should be, no matter what, because you can say anybody can be sued for anything.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, Buck, you can probably confirm that there's basically no regulation as of now, right?
Well, yeah, that's the one. There is no regulation, and personally, I don't think there should be. It used to be under the Ontario Athletic Commission, along with things like judo or MMA or boxing or anything else. And there was a match between booked, I believe it was Bloody Bill Scullion versus Lufisto, female wrestler out of Quebec, and Ken Hayashi, who was in charge of all this commission. He said the match wouldn't be able to take place. It was taken to court, and in the end, as a result of whatever happened in court, the match happened, and wrestling was no longer under the Ontario Athletic Commission. So licenses were no longer needed for wrestlers or promoters or anything else. And again, it being an entertainment, I've been the stage manager for Canada's biggest sideshow, and I think wrestling has a lot, I mean, as much in common, if not more, with that than with a sport. And there isn't a commission overseeing sword swallowers, even though I know Canada's most prolific sword swallower personally, and he sustained an injury doing that in the last year and had a terrible infection and a hospital stay, and people doing all sorts of stunts like that. So I think it's more akin to that, and I don't believe it should be have a authority over it like other sports do.
So, yeah, but on that, yeah, I guess I just wanted to jump in there, but like,
well, I was going to pitch it to you anyways.
But I mean, even in those settings, right? I mean, there's got to be, whether it's like an external body, but like, again, you don't just send a stunt person, hey, you want to be in this, you're an extra in Murdoch Mysteries or something, go off and jump off the ledge here and try to land like this, right? There's more directive than that, right? And I think that's really, when it comes down to negligence, like what training were they given, were they told how to identify, again, to diagnose or have somebody else diagnose any kinds of injuries, and proper rest and go to the doctors and get things checked out before you continue. Because again, that goes with anything, right? I mean, anything there, even bungee jumping, right? It doesn't mean that we have certain safety standards, right? In terms of things in place. So again, even though you assume the risk when you do a lot of things, it doesn't mean that, like I even assume the risk when you park at some of these parking lots. It doesn't mean somebody can just go in there and steal from my car and be like, oh, well, you assume the risk, like too bad, right? I mean, there's got to be, appropriate mechanisms put in place. And I think that's really where they're going to look at, well, what were they told? What, if it's entertainment, right? What bumps were they taking where they needed, right? I mean, if they were going to be like a valet, right, or something, maybe they wanted to enhance their acting chops. That's different than going in there and taking a Canadian destroyer or something.
Yeah, and I think that kind of circles back to my point earlier, is it sport or is it film entertainment? Because I mean, competing as a wrestler and then being a wrestler on television are two different things, and I've done both. So, and what I can say is that, Canadore College was running an acting program, and then they had this wrestling training school come on, and they were like, okay, I guess it was an add-on to the acting program. So like for me, looking at the surface level, of course, we're going to wait for the judicial process, but it seems like it was acting based, which means that the safety protocols should be much more heavy. We have Sam, you're a entertainment lawyer. Would you deal with any parts of this, or would you be more into contractual stuff?
Well, entertainment law can go into any of this. It can go into tort. It can go into contracts, right? So I hear what you're saying. And I think from the article, it almost seemed like he might have been luring her because of how she looked, right? Like you said, it maybe have looked to her like it was more acting than anything else. But wrestling's wrestling. It still has its risks. And again, it goes back to the points everybody's been saying is what was said to her. And if she knew the risks and she took those risks, maybe it's not going to go in their way. Maybe it's not going to go in the favor of the estate. So I'd be curious to hear what their testimony is in relation to, or the wrestling school's testimony and the professor's testimony in relation to how do they get people to join, right? Do they just say, hey, that we have this option? Or do they say, like what you guys said earlier, do this and you get extra credit? I don't know. I'm really curious.
One point that was in either documents or in the media was Josh Bain, who I guess is a professor at the college. So he was very pointed that he pointed out that he was a wrestling student under the school. So he was a professor of the acting program that the actors came from, but he almost, I think maybe like shifting the blame. Maybe that's what the purpose of that was, but he was saying that he was also a trainee in the program. So do you have any thoughts on that, JP?
And I want to add to that, because there's a little piece of information, not that I'm giving my opinion here, but just a little bit of extra context. Wasn't it that there was a company called BT Holdings that was owned by both Dan and Joshua that owned the wrestling school? So that sort of adds some interesting context when he's saying he's just a student, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a general saying, he who profits pays, right? So if he's making, indirectly money because the student comes to the school that he's even just a student at, but maybe a part owner, that certainly amplifies things. But I mean, again, right? I mean, if you're in education and you tell your students, hey, by the way, I'm doing this cool. You want to improve your acting. I'm trying to do it myself. I'm doing wrestling. You should come check it out. I'm there, right? I mean, again, given that power dynamic, and even if the college is saying, we're not directly affiliated, maybe we're not putting their logo on a flyer at the school, but I mean, if it's being brought up by a professor, whether on a message board or website or even in the classroom, right? Can you really separate that connection to the college, given that it's being said by someone who's in a position of authority over their students, right? And it could be anything, right? I mean, it could be even something as saying, hey, you should check out, this event and something happens, right? I mean, because you're kind of suggesting, and again, impressionable minds that are students are going to say, well, my professor is mentioning this, so I felt obligated. I mean, the other thing that's a real big factor here as well is like, we're not going to hear from the deceased, right? Like, we're not going to hear the context. I mean, we'll have maybe text messages, emails, and try to really retell the story that way. But that's really going to be part of, well, what did they know? What were they getting into? And, how long were they there? And what were they doing? I've
got a question on that note. So would it be useful, or do you think they'll look into perhaps whether it was brought up in the classroom with other students and whether the teacher was indirectly or directly recruiting, was the word they want to use. So whether it's indirect or direct, like, is that a blurry line, or because he's a mentor within a position of power, is indirect recruiting still going to lead to some blame here?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, they want to tie it to the college because the college will have much deeper pockets. But I mean, you have a tangible connection, right? If it's coming up, and they're going to call likely other students in the class or and say, well, what was discussed about wrestling, right? I mean, is this guy bringing it up every class? Hey, last week I learned how to do this. It's really cool. You could check it out. If he's offering some kind of discount, I mean, hey, I know the owners. I can get you in, right? I mean, how much of it is being brought up, or if it's just you look up your professor or your teacher on Instagram and you like, oh, look, they're in a wrestling school. I'm going to join because I want to get to the top of the class. I want to impress them. No different than the We're in Law, right? If people come to some of the legal events, Sam and I put on, right? I mean, they might think that even if we never mentioned that, right? So that does certainly factor in as to how much was the wrestling school mentioned. I mean, and is the college mentioning it at all anywhere, right? I mean, if there's a flyer up at the college anywhere, it basically is suggesting it's a partnership of some kind.
Yeah, I think let's expand on something a little bit, because I mean, Buck can attest to this. I can attest to this because I've been through a bunch of wrestling schools, and the waiver of liabilities and risk is I think it's a haphazard process in a lot of cases, because it just seems like it's wrestlers running a business that just kind of, so sometimes there's not even a waiver involved. You just go in. So Sam, do you have any thoughts on like kind of potential hazards that we're looking into right now? Because even like with the case that we're talking about, it wouldn't even surprise me if there wasn't a waiver. And so like I don't know how that would shift the decision making, but I've gone to gyms and not signed anything before. I'm sure Buck has too. So Sam, what do you think about that?
I mean, a waiver's not ironclad anyway, right? So whether there was or wasn't, I mean, we could poke holes in waivers, right? Because again, it's what was said to the individual, what they were told. Were they told that they needed equipment to wrestle? Were they told, were they being monitored as they were being trained? Was the equipment all in good state of repair? So a waiver can only take a company so far, regardless if a person voluntarily assumed risks. They don't assume all risks that could come forward, because I think there's this shared responsibility. Yes, it's wrestling. Yes, there could be injury, but from a school's perspective, it's their job to protect their students, regardless if there's a waiver or not. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. So I don't have too much more, so we can wrap this up soon. Unless Buck, do you have any questions you want to, or topics you want to expand on?
No, I think we shed a lot of light and got some interesting angles and questions.
I have one more thing that I wanted. I have one more thing. The defendant, Dan Jarrus, it says in the media that he's representing himself. So Sam, what do you think about that?
There's a saying, and I'm going to say it wrong, so maybe JP can jump in and say it. JP.
He who represents themselves has a fool for a client.
Absolutely.
And so, you don't necessarily know the law, right? Like, I don't know, I can't go in there into the ring and take moves, right? The same thing, right? You got to sort of know that and better protect your rights. And I mean, the other thing I guess maybe to touch on is that, the likelihood of this going all the way to trial, I don't think, the likelihood is not there, right? I think at some point, maybe that's why he's representing himself, is that they're going to come up with what's the dollar amount. We're going to assess the benefits and the risks of going forward. And, again, like how we're having a spirited discussion, their lawyers, or the ones that have lawyers, are having the same discussion of, well, what is the dollar amount that we think, the college might be responsible, the individual professor, if anything, Dan Jarvis there and others. And on the other end, the plaintiff, the estate, right, as well, what's the amount, right? Because what risks, as we're talking about, do they know? And, eventually they'll come up with a dollar amount, and it'll likely be settled, and, it'll be a non-disclosure agreement. And that's what I think is a likely outcome here. And all these interesting things that we want to learn about will likely never come to light, because they're going to say, well, here's the price that we're willing to put on, and resolve the matter. But but perhaps that's why he's confident. Maybe it's not going to go to trial, that he doesn't want to incur. I mean, I heard. I think Buck was telling me that they're still running shows, so maybe they got to pay for something. Right?
I wouldn't be running shows if I was in his shoes. I'll just say that. I don't know. That's I don't need to. I don't know if we need to go down there. But thanks so much for coming on. This was really, really cool. And hopefully we can get more guests on, or maybe we can bring you guys back, because I really enjoyed this. Do you have any closing remarks we'll start with Sam?
No, I mean, look, I love wrestling. We all do. We want to keep it going all over Ontario, the indie circuits, and hopefully this does end in a settlement so that it doesn't destroy the industry, because it's hard. It's hard to operate these shows, and it's hard to operate these different companies. So I just want to see it continue to go. Yeah,
for sure. So JP, what do you think? Any closing remarks?
I think it's important that you got to find sort of balances, right? Is that there are obviously costs to get things in these situations where I can't imagine they're always very profitable, right? And so sometimes you're like, look, we're doing the best we can, but we can see that there are very tragic consequences, and there have been at all levels tragedies that have happened in the ring and outside of the ring, and even the best doctors and the best cares don't prevent that. But at the same time, there's got to be better protocol in place, and I think especially here, given that they're not necessarily the same level, they're not been in wrestling schools for years, that I don't know if they're you got to protect the people that can't be protected sometimes, especially because they don't necessarily know what's happening. So I think it does give us we got to look at doing better, but again, I don't think we need to sort of reinvent the wheel. I agree with Buck that we don't need overly regulating wrestling schools and wrestling itself, and sports entertainment for that matter in Ontario. Otherwise, a lot of these places won't be able to continue to put on the shows. I know Sam just coming right from Destiny right now, right? So we want to see more of that, and the way to do that is to have everyone buy into protecting everybody, and at the same time not over regulating it to the point that it's not feasible.
Yeah, great. 1 star. You got anything to close us out?
Well, I have something. The 1 star, obviously something. I'm always so thoughtful, and I'm thinking of our viewers. I'm thinking of all the hate watchers. I'm thinking about all the keyboard warriors, all the vaggots sitting at home, hitting the like or the dislike, sharing it in their Facebook groups. And in case any of those people should require some legal services, Sam, JP, what's the best way for them, any of them, to find you online or anywhere else before you go?
Sure, all over social media. You can find both JP and I. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, you name it, we're on it.
You can mention those. We'll drop them in the description as well. But if you want to mention those, you can go ahead specifically and explicitly right now.
JP?
Sure, you can hit me up at jp@jprlaw.ca there. Happy to help. Happy to just talk wrestling with you. And I think it's been some time, and it's been great to sort of see my two loves there intersect. And if there's there's anything else that ever comes up, happy to chat more about it.
Yeah. So this is the CastAsCastCan podcast. Are dissecting more of this controversial story. We're all about the controversies. We cast the questions and catch the truth, and we'll see you next week.